A mystery that cannot be explained. An enigma that defies reason. A surprising and unexpected answer. To encounter such a mystery firsthand may change your life forever. Face to face with the greatest riddles of the ages, the world's most profound mysteries reach out and touch your life in ways you never imagined possible. Xtrem Mysteries.
God says, "You shall make an ark."
According to the Bible, Moses had a box, or ark, built to exacting specifications given to him by the Lord himself. This ark was to be considered holy and contain the tablets of the covenant between God and Israel. God also instructed them to build a tabernacle within which the ark could be placed when they rested in their wanderings. For centuries, this precious artifact has been the subject of scholarly debate and deep religious devotion, but no one knew where it was. Is it possible the Ark of the Covenant has been found? Centuries-old Ethiopian tradition claims the Ark is guarded day and night in this small chapel in Ethiopia. Have researchers confirmed the Ethiopian tradition? Respected members of the Jewish community in Israel have told investigators they actually discovered the Ark in a secret chamber beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Can both be correct? Is there more than one Ark of the Covenant? Could it be that Israel has been protecting the Ark for years? The amazing journey of the Ark begins in just a moment. There seems to be fairly general agreement that the Ark of the Covenant was removed from its place in the temple to protect it from the desecrations of King Manasseh. Recent discoveries have led scholars to believe it was taken to Elephantine Island near Aswan in Egypt, where a Jewish temple was in fact built. But that still leaves two unanswered questions. Where did the Ark go when it left Egypt, and is it still there today? Dr. Adolf Hanna has personally been involved with the archaeology of Elephantine Island for over 20 years. According to Dr. Hanna, writing has been discovered that indicates the Ark of the Covenant was there and rested in this temple. This temple was built to the same dimensions as Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, but it was eventually destroyed. Why was it so completely destroyed? And by whom?
There was a conflict between the Jews and the Egyptians. It was standard practice for the Jews to sacrifice a ram every morning at sunrise. But this just happened to be the Egyptians' favorite god, Khnum. They didn't appreciate their god being killed every morning. The Jewish community was simply no longer welcome on the island of Elephantine.
The Ark, if it was here, vanished once again along with the people. But Dr. Hanna, based on his own research, has developed an interesting theory of the Ark's history.
According to Dr. Hanna, the Jews at Elephantine wrote a letter to Jerusalem asking for help in rebuilding the temple. But when the Jews in Jerusalem found out there was another temple, they were furious, and they rebuffed the Jews at Elephantine for having ever built it in the first place. The Jews at Elephantine Island felt not welcome in Jerusalem. They were no longer welcome at Elephantine, so they took the Ark of the Covenant and followed the Nile River south into Ethiopia.
Could it be that we are finally on the trail of the true Ark of the Covenant? Is it possible that it wasn't Menelik, but a group of Jewish priests who brought the Ark to Ethiopia? Do these young Ethiopian Jews know where the Ark might be today? The mystery continues to unfold. If the Ark of the Covenant was removed from its place in the temple to protect it from the desecrations of King Manasseh and taken to Elephantine Island, that still leaves two unanswered questions. How did the Ark get from Egypt to Ethiopia, and how did it come into possession of the Christians?
The vast Nile River system leads ultimately to one of two sources. The first one, of course, is Uganda. The other source of the Nile, the Blue Nile, where most of the water comes from, is in Lake Tana in Ethiopia.
One of the most surprising discoveries of Hancock and Cornuke's research was a small island tucked away in this huge lake in Ethiopia. Here, they uncovered a surprising history.
It is very difficult to get to Tanakirkos Island. It takes about 3.5 hours by small boat to get there. Lake Tana is a very large lake. It's one of the largest in all Africa. And the Ethiopians consider Tanakirkos Island to be a very holy place.
This tiny island is one of Ethiopia's most protected holy sites. Barely a mile long and covered with lush vegetation, it is highly restricted. Few are allowed to visit, and only men are welcome.
When I arrived at Tanakirkos Island, it was the most mysterious place I've ever been to. It's literally like stepping back into time. They grow their own corn, they make their own clothes, they live in thatched huts. They live as they did thousands and thousands of years ago. The monks that live on the island were once brought there by their parents in hopes that they could be worthy to live on the island where the Ark of the Covenant sat.
Is it possible that these holy men, who still practice rituals thousands of years old, have reliable information about the Ark of the Covenant?
They said when the Ark of the Covenant was first brought into Ethiopia, it was not taken to Xtrem first, but was brought to the island of Kirkos on Lake Tana, where it was venerated for hundreds of years.
The tradition of the island is that the Ark of the Covenant was placed in a tent called a tabernacle here on this rocky ledge. Undisturbed by archaeologists or souvenir hunters, this small plateau does in fact show evidence of such a tent. Holes precisely 13 feet apart and placed in a north-south to east-west direction can still be seen. It is not surprising that these socket holes approximate the size of the tabernacle described in the Bible. But is there any other evidence to support this tradition?
The Ethiopians and the monks showed me many implements that they said were from Solomon's temple. They showed us meat forks, bowls, stands, silver trumpets. I said, why weren't these implements taken to Xtrem with the Ark of the Covenant? They said when the country was converted to Christianity, they no longer needed these implements to be brought to Xtrem. So they were abandoned and left with the monks on the island.
According to the monks, this large brass dish, called a gomer, used in the blood sacrifice, this stand, and these large meat forks, also used in the blood sacrifice, are all artifacts that were left behind.
And if these objects are from Solomon's temple, they are the only ones in existence today.
Suddenly, all of the pieces of the puzzle start fitting together. We have evidence that the Ark of the Covenant left Jerusalem before the Babylonian invasion. Then we have a temple being built on the island of Elephantine, several hundred miles to the south. 200 years later, that temple is destroyed. And about the same time, we start hearing of the Ark of the Covenant in Ethiopia on the island of Kirkos. The monks there say the Ark was there for 800 years, until the Christian king came and took the Ark to Xtrem.
I've heard stories, wild stories about the Ark and where it is and where it's been taken. The Ethiopians are firmly convinced and have convinced me that they have either a most incredible replica of the Ark of the Covenant or they actually have the real Ark of the Covenant as mentioned in the Bible.
This is an intriguing account of where the Ark of the Covenant might be located. But before we accept it as gospel, perhaps we should examine the even more provocative Israelite account. This tradition begins in 586 BC when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar and his armies were about to deliver the final destructive blow to Jerusalem. According to Jewish historians, this was anticipated, and the temple priests took precautions to protect the ark.
The sins of this people must truly be an abomination in God's eyes. It's just a matter of hours, perhaps even minutes, before Nebuchadnezzar and the raging Babylonians are in upon us.
We must not let the ark fall into the hands of the pagan. We must take it to Solomon's vault. The 6 of us are too old to carry the ark in the way that God instructed Moses.
We are young, Holy One, and waiting to serve God.
Give us your blessing and your order.
I send you to your death. You must be sealed within the tunnel.
My brother and I have lived our lives in the temple. We would end them here before any place in the world. Your grace and forgiveness, Holy Ones. The walls are breached, and the Babylonians are pouring into the city. You must flee, now!
Quickly, brethren. We must do it quickly.
According to this tradition, the ark was taken by the priest and secreted in a vault under the Temple of Solomon that could only be accessed through an underground tunnel. It was thought lost forever, until now. The most important evidence that the Bible is literally true could come from the rediscovery of the Ark of the Covenant. That's why so many have looked so hard for it. But is there any way to reconcile the two traditions? Could there be an ark both in Ethiopia and under the Temple Mount?
When the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon in Jerusalem, she had an affair with him, and the payment was the ark. She demanded the ark, and she took the ark back to Sheba, which is Ethiopia. Before that, it was called the Ark of the Lord. After that, it was simply called the Ark. And many people believe, and it could be, that a duplicate ark was made and put into the temple area, and the true ark was taken to Ethiopia.
Or could it be that all the searching is in vain? The book of Revelation states very plainly that John saw the ark in heaven.
Some confusion has been caused by the fact that Revelation chapter 19 refers to a prophetic vision in which the author describes seeing a vision of the ark in heaven. This is no contradiction to the fact of there being an earthly ark that is still in existence. The fact is that God tells us in the book of Exodus that Moses was commanded to make the earthly ark, as well as the tabernacle and all the objects, after the pattern of the original that was in heaven. So in other words, there has always been an Ark of the Covenant in heaven, as well as the earthly ark.
The Ethiopian tradition and the Israelite tradition, by the way, are not the only stories that support a precise location for the Ark of the Covenant. According to ancient Jewish writings, some contend the Ark is hidden on Mount Nebo in Jordan. Others suggest the Ark is hidden somewhere near the Dead Sea on the Jordan's west bank.
And then again, other people think that Jeremiah, when he was taken to Egypt, we know this is a fact, that they went to the Isle of Tahpanhes down in the delta of the Nile River. They built a temple there, and they think that the ark was put into that temple. Later, the Egyptians came and destroyed that temple, and they think that at that time, the Ark of the Covenant ended up as one of the treasures in the treasure house of the Egyptians.
And one American researcher claims to have found it in a stone-carved room under Gordon's Calvary near the Garden Tomb. According to this story, a man by the name of Ron Wyatt found the ark here underneath the place of the skull on January 6, 1982. After 4 years of digging, Wyatt said he found the entrance to Jeremiah's grotto, a room 14 feet by 22 feet by 8 feet high. In this room, he said he found items of furniture from Solomon's temple and the Ark of the Covenant. For political reasons, Wyatt said he was asked by the Director of Antiquities to close up the entrance to the grotto. Unfortunately, Wyatt died before he was able to convince Israeli officials to inspect his find further. The grotto, if it ever existed, has failed to excite the interest of archaeologists. But does anyone really know? And if there are those who have reliable information, do they know which ark is the true ark? Is it possible that the Ethiopian ark and the ark said to be under the Temple Mount could be the same? Have the Jews finally reclaimed their most precious religious artifact, the true Ark of the Covenant? Some startling conclusions are straight ahead. The evidence for the Ark of the Covenant being or having been in Ethiopia is largely circumstantial. But archaeologically and historically, the evidence supporting that idea is very compelling. But what about the tradition of the Ark being under the Temple Mount? Is there any modern evidence to support this claim? In 1981, an excavation took place on Temple Mount. 3 rabbis made a discovery that very nearly set off another holy war between the Muslims and Jews.
If we look at this sketch of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, we can see subterranean passageways. Superimposing upon this a model of the temple, the Jewish historical sources tell us that there was a chamber of wood, or a wood pen, underneath which was a secret chamber that King Josiah deposited the Ark of the Covenant in shortly before the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians. In 1981, 3 rabbis entered through Warren's Gate, one of the original entrances to the Temple Mount. They tunneled through and came to an area in which they claim they now have direct knowledge of the exact location of the Ark of the Covenant within this chamber.
Do you believe that some of the temple treasury...
Yet Huda Getz, chief rabbi of the Western Wall, was one of the tunnelers in 1981. Rabbi Getz states that he has found the Ark of the Covenant and its contents, including the original 10 Commandments, hidden for over 2,500 years in a secret vault beneath the temple. These incredible discoveries were also witnessed by Rabbi Shlomo Goren.
We were excavating under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem when we came to an underground room deep beneath and in the direction of the Holy of the Holies. And it was the Ark of the Covenant that Moses placed in the 10 Commandments. When we came close to the Holy of the Holies, the Arab management of the Temple Mount, they decided to stop our diggings, and they erected a wall in order to stop us from getting to the Holy Ark.
Many think the Ark of the Covenant is under the Temple Mount, and there have been certain Jewish rabbis who claim to have seen the Ark of the Covenant there. Other people believe that in one of those caverns, those tunnels, man-made tunnels under the Temple Mount, it would be there, hidden, and we would not know about it. I think that there are 7 caverns there, but the Jews always had 7 plus 1, and they think there's another one, and it was hid there right before Nebuchadnezzar took the city.
As to the contention that the Ark under the Temple Mount is a replica, the same contention might as easily be made concerning the Ethiopian Ark. There is really no other basis to support the Ethiopian claim than the Ethiopian traditions. And in fact, there are a great many replicas of the Ark throughout the churches in Ethiopia that preserve this tradition. The evidence rather strongly supports the real Ark being under the Temple Mount.
So the evidence and the testimonies for the Ark being under the Temple Mount are also very compelling. Is it possible that 2 arks were made and both have been found?
The greatest Jewish rabbi in history, Moses Maimonides, in around 1200 AD, wrote a 14-volume series called the Mishnah Torah to codify Jewish law. In one of those 14 books, called the one that is dealing with the rebuilding of the temple, he tells us that there is a Jewish tradition handed down by the rabbis and the Talmud that Solomon was commanded to make a second ark, and that this second ark was sometimes used and taken out in battle. There is no additional evidence beyond this tradition, but there certainly is a written confirmation that there was a tradition of 2 arks.
Modern researchers are faced with the possibility that there have always been 2 arks, both sacred, both constructed by God's command. Could this be true? Is it possible that one contains the tablets prepared by God and broken by Moses, and the other, the tablets prepared by Moses and written on by the finger of God? If so, would one be considered more holy than the other? Is it even possible that both arks might now be back in Jerusalem? The black Jews of Ethiopia were rescued from persecution and death by an heroic airlift of the Israeli military during the violent closing days of the Ethiopian Civil War. This is a well-attested fact. But could it be that there was another rescue that took place about the same time? A rescue that has largely been kept a secret.
There is compelling historical evidence from the Ethiopian records, the Kaber Nagast, the Royal Chronicles, that the Ark has been in Ethiopia for 3,000 years. However, I've had three independent sources, an Ethiopian Air Force general, an Israeli Air Force general, as well as a Canadian diplomat who was in Ethiopia at the time in 1991 when the Ethiopian Civil War ended, that this object was taken out of Ethiopia by the Israelis, who apparently flew into Ethiopia with a military plane, and these men, though they were elite military units, were composed of people from the tribe of Levi. According to the scriptures, only those from the tribe of Levi were allowed to touch the ark in the sense of carrying it by carrying the staves without touching the actual body of the ark. According to these rumors, the ark was taken secretly to Israel, where it remains waiting in secret until the time when the temple will be built and the ark would be placed once more in the Holy of Holies.
The Levites, we were told, were specially trained members of the Mossad. They made the entire trip standing up, their legs in braces. Could it be that the Levites of today still respect the historic power of the Ark of the Covenant? According to the report, at no time was the Ark allowed to touch the floor or the ground until it was placed in a specially prepared site. According to our sources, the Ark was returned to Israel with the full knowledge and cooperation of the Ethiopian government, and the Ethiopian Jews who were rescued are among those in Jerusalem who are now preparing to rebuild the third temple, which, according to tradition, will be the final resting place of the true Ark of the Covenant.
One of the most exciting events on the horizon today is the emergence of a temple being rebuilt in Jerusalem. And this is the third of three major events in Israel: the reestablishment of the nation Israel, the regaining of biblical Jerusalem by Israel, which happened in 1967, and now they are preparing to build the temple. This whole event is all tangled up with their messianic expectation, and to a biblical scholar, it's one of the most exciting things on our horizon.
The key to our direct relationship with God is the Holy Temple. The main way that we are going about this is by actually producing, restoring, creating the vessels that can be used in the temple. Of the 93 basic categories of vessels that are described in the Holy Sources, we have so far created almost 60 vessels made of gold, copper, and silver, according to the original source material, and based on the complicated nuances and requirements of Jewish law. While our itinerary includes many of the vessels that are described in the Holy Sources to be used in the temple, the Ark is one item which is not on our itinerary for recreation because we are aware of the location of the original, which was hidden in the time of the first temple before the first destruction.
The evidence seems very strong that the Ark of the Covenant has indeed been found. But if it has, those who know of its precise location are still keeping it a secret. Is it possible that someday, soon, perhaps in our lifetime, the Ark of the Covenant with its precious artifacts will be brought out to a waiting world? What will it mean for all mankind if the actual covenant revealed to Moses is suddenly before our very eyes? Will it still have power to strengthen armies as it did the armies of the ancient Jewish nation? Or will it simply empower Judeo-Christian faith as it has done for the Ethiopian Christians and Jews for the past 3,000 years? What could this remarkable artifact bring into our lives? The answer to that question is definitely worth considering.